Hello, and welcome to the Blizzard Watch podcast. This is Matt. I am hosting. I have Liz Pat, Liz Harper, and Joe Perez are all here today. We're going to talk about various games that come from Blizzard and other things that Blizzard is doing. I think I speak for everybody when I don't think any of us were expecting the top story to be the top story today.
Well, maybe we should do the whole introduction of who's here, I think, before we start getting into the top story, because we do have a guest.
Yeah, Liz, I just mentioned her.
Yeah, we do, but let her talk. Say hi.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
I am also astounded by this top story, and I'm looking forward to a loader retraction. It's so rare, like a unicorn.
It's rare that I'm wrong. Sorry, Matt. Go right ahead.
No. Now you're gonna do the retraction.
Yeah, listen. I'm gonna eat crow on this one. I am eternally shocked. Like, I was literally at work at the day job, and I get a bunch of messages on Discord, be like, "Dude, you were wrong. We're getting a new BlizzCon." And I'm sitting there like, "No, you're yanking my chain on this one." And I'm like, and I go and look it up, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is actually happening." I am extraordinarily surprised. But yeah, I was wrong. We apparently it is not too expensive, or maybe they just, the cost be damned or something like that. And they're back. So there you go. It is it's coming.
Let's then turn to Liz Harper, who is the only person who hasn't actually gotten to talk yet. Liz,
Hello.
You should probably break down the news for people, because right now they're probably like, what are they talking about? BlizzCon? What's going on with BlizzCon?
There's going to be a BlizzCon in 2026. You will note that it ends with a 6, not with a 5, so it's not this year, it is next year. And as Matt has said, we're all surprised. Yes, this is a bit of a roundabout way of telling us BlizzCon 2025 is canceled, but we are still getting a BlizzCon in the future. It is on September 12th and 13th, so it is clearly in celebration of my birthday. Thank you. Or maybe maybe not thank you, because that's going to be a really heckin' busy week. And
for your birthday, we give you a continuous work for 3 days.
Yeah. My birthday is on the 13th, so that's going to be not the busiest day of BlizzCon, but it's still usually on the second day of BlizzCon. We here at Blizzard Watch are catching up on all the things on the first day of BlizzCon, because we spent the entire day doing nothing but writing. So it is on a Saturday and Sunday instead of the usual Friday, Saturday, which is an interesting change. And of course, it's in September instead of November, which has become normal. Of course, over the past years, Blizzard has moved BlizzCon around, but lately they have really stuck to that November time period. So it is interesting that it's different. They're planning it so far out, and they announced it so far out. I mean, for an event late 2026, it seems ridiculously early to announce it. But I guess this does reassure people that, okay, BlizzCon is not canceled forever. We're still here for you guys. We aren't ending the tradition. Also, I don't know if y'all feel the same way, but I feel like Chris Metzen may have played a role in this, whether intentionally or not.
Yeah, I feel like he was.
God. And when you get Metzen on a stage, he just energizes a crowd. Just completely. He owns an audience when he is on stage.
They will play whatever pretzels he sells.
Quite frankly, yes, they would. That's a side story that we probably aren't getting into now. But and I think he loves it. He loves BlizzCon. He loves getting on stage. He loves seeing everyone who love the games he's made. I feel like if Metzen were not at Blizzard, then maybe this would not be happening.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I was thinking about that a little bit earlier. Like, that seems like the most likely vector. Like,
what got me here, what you've got me thinking though, is remember earlier when we were doing the pre-show, and you mentioned thinking Brendan Lee Mulligan as the president of a comedy bit. I just imagined another bit of his where he shows up to something, and everyone's like, he's like, "So when are we doing this?" And they were all like, I just feel like he was like, "So what we're doing for BlizzCon?" And everyone was like, can we actually tell him there's no BlizzCon? I don't think we can. Look at him. He looks so eager. So we were having BlizzCon because Chris Metzen didn't know they weren't having it.
Yeah. And what's especially interesting to me is, obviously take this with a grain of marketing salt, but they're aiming to meaningfully elevate the celebration and create
What
an
does that
unforgettable
mean?
experience. I don't know what that means, but I think it means we will see a slightly modified version of BlizzCon, just date change notwithstanding.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess we're going to find out what that elevation actually means, because boy, howdy, do I have no idea.
I'm just going to say September is a great time to go to Disneyland. I'm just saying. Because school has started for most people, so it's less crowded. It's one of the less expensive times of the year to go to Disneyland because, it's no holidays. But they already the park is already going to be decorated for Halloween in September. So you can get in your Halloween early. Perfect time to go to Disneyland. Maybe that's what this is about. This is how I would have planned it and why I would have planned it that way. Doesn't mean Blizzard thought that out. But the schedule is Liz approved.
All right. Anyone else have anything else in particular they want to talk about before BlizzCon before we move on?
No, I
did wonder.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, you first.
Okay. I had wondered for a little bit if this was going to be, like a special event because of, a 20-year anniversary or something, but that it would have actually been this year.
Yeah. I mean, last year was the big anniversary year. So I don't know.
Is Corey in chat? Because Phil's in chat and he said this, and it was also what I was thinking. The reason they're doing it next year, not this year, is so they can announce the big re-release of Heroes of the Storm, because they got to get it all up and running and get ready for the next, the next content drop for it, and make it a big thing. At this point, I've been wrong about a few other things with like BlizzCon, so I'm just going to throw that out there and see if I can manifest it at this point, because why not? If you're listening, Blizzard, please.
Shouldn't you be predicting it's not going to happen then?
I mean, I'm just going with the opposite of what I normally think. So I figure if that's what's going to happen, I thought BlizzCon was going to happen. BlizzCon's happening. So I'm going to go with the opposite and see if that works.
Okay. I do think we have to talk about something else because it's kind of hard to talk too much about a BlizzCon where all we know about it is that it will happen in more than a year from now.
Yeah. I mean, by the time BlizzCon is here, we're going to be playing Midnight. Midnight is on the roadmap for kind of early 2026. So we do not know what the game's going to be like in 2026 for World of Warcraft.
No, but we'll be at that point with it releasing, we'll probably already be starting to get the hype and speculation for the Last Titan.
I bet we will. And we'll be going into a new Diablo 4 expansion because they aren't releasing one in 2025. That's pushed back to 2026. I would think it would launch before BlizzCon, but it's possible it's launching late next year. We don't know. So there could be some really interesting things they have to talk about.
If they launched it at BlizzCon, for example, like that was right before the go live, or they did one of those special events around it, that would be 2 years between Diablo expansions, which is still better than dropping one expansion and then nothing else.
Yeah, fair enough. You could argue it is the most rapid. Yeah, you could argue it's the most rapid release expansion since they've never done more than one. But I am at this point going to force us to talk about World of Warcraft and specifically the race to world first in the whole deal, the Undermine raid, for the very simple reason that I have no idea what's going on there. And thus, I can basically say, "Hey, Liz, what's going on?" And then I can just be quiet.
It's glorious.
It's been a really interesting race so far. Interesting to various people in various ways. One thing is there was not a heroic week before Mythic launched, and basically for people excited to tune in to World First, that meant that most guilds did not go into Mythic until like Thursday, Friday, because they spent the entire week doing heroic splits to get key gear and get everyone in tier. And so it's been a lot of watching very repetitive content and then repeating it again amongst all of the top guilds. As of this recording, which is on Tuesday, we have only seen up to the 5th boss cleared, which is not very far for the first week. The 4th boss, I keep getting his name wrong because they all have crazy goblin names. Sorry, goblins, I'm not saying anything bad about your names, but I cannot say them. Styx Bunk Junker. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. Fourth boss took 114 pulls, and Liquid used Vantis runes to get him down. So that is a lot for a fourth boss. The fifth boss, Echo killed first. That Sprocketmonger Lockenstock. You see what I'm saying about these names? You see what I mean? He took 113 pulls. So if this race continues at this pace, I think we're probably in for a 3-week world first race. Because even these kind of mid-range bosses are taking over 100 pulls. So what happens when you go into some of the really difficult bosses like Muggsy and, of course, Gallywix himself up there at the end? What's the slot machine called?
The one-armed...
one-armed bandit?
Yep.
Okay, so the slot machine boss is a really complicated boss. All of the next 3 bosses are really complicated. And if it's taken them over 100 pulls to do the last 2 bosses, then we're probably talking at least 100 pulls for the next 2 bosses and more than that for Gallywix. So I think this is going to be a long race. It's also been kind of complicated by the fact that Liquid spent about 3 hours on Monday with their power out. The power was apparently out for the whole block they were on. So they were kind of out of the race midday, so they've gotten a little behind, but we're still kind of halfway through. And there's plenty of time for anyone to come up and take this. It's still kind of Liquid, Method, and Echo up in that top 3 spots, competing on the same bosses usually. And we'll just see. We'll see how it comes out in the end. But I think we're in for a long race.
So the Liquid kill for Styx was on, was that Sunday or Monday?
It was not Monday.
Okay. So that's really interesting to me because if it had been Monday, you know, that could have been a strategic thing where we're popping Vantis runes on him to get ahead before reset. But if it was, you know, Sunday, that's interesting. That's an interesting choice. And I feel like maybe if Echo, you know, jumped ahead on Sprocketmonger, then they might have paid for a little bit. But you know, it's reset day when we're recording this, so yeah, it might change up entirely.
Yeah, I think they were close enough to reset, and Styx had already taken so many pulls that it's like, okay, we're a couple days from reset. We're almost certainly not going to get the next boss down after this guy. So let's just use our Vantis runes and get this guy down. And they killed him the first pull after they used Vantis runes. They just needed that one little extra bump to get over that. And Styx is very complicated. He has a lot of RNG because throughout the fight, he summons these garbage piles around the room. And then he puts, I believe 4 players get chosen to go up on balls, which roll around the room, and you roll up the piles of trash. Okay, so you got the Katamari Damacy thing going on. You roll up piles of trash, you roll over ads, but the tank is always chosen to get a ball, but I believe the other 3 players are random. So you could get players chosen who are not in a good position to grab trash. You could get players chosen, and they're really far from the trash. And once they collect all of the trash and make their own trash ball big, they can run into bombs and destroy them. The bombs could be poorly placed for players to get to. So there are all of these things that are randomly placed around the field that can make the fight more difficult. And if you have bad placement, if bad players are chosen, if players that you need to get through that phase to kill the ads in that phase are chosen, that can be a problem.
I wish it would just stop choosing me. Just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, it can choose healers.
Yep.
So you could have a healer yanked into that. You could have guilds have been stacking Moonkin for that fight. Guilds have been going in with 3 Moonkin, and it's really weird to see guilds stack classes that heavily in World First. But they'll go in with 3 Moonkin to have that AoE power to really bring those ads down fast so they can get back on the boss. But yeah, you know, if you get a couple Moonkin chosen, then you have more trouble getting those ads down, which means you may wipe on that phase while the Moonkins are all over there rolling around on their trash balls. So there's a lot of randomness to it. and it takes just a lot of DPS to just burn him down and overcome all of that. And just using the Vantis runes was enough to help them survive and get the boss down. They did it immediately the next pull after using runes.
But you know what's also incredibly cool, and here I'm kind of advancing forward in the notes, is that this week the story mode comes out. So if you're not in a guild that has burned everything down in the first week, you can actually experience the end of the Undermined story, and no spoilers whatsoever, but it's a good ending. I liked it a lot.
Isn't LFR Wing 2 also going?
It is.
Yes.
It is. Yep, just did
Yes.
it. I did it today, actually.
So you have two more weeks, or is that? Do we have one more or two more wings for LFR?
Two more.
Two
more wings. So 2 more weeks, all of the LFR wings will be out. But you can. Story mode is literally for the story, and I believe this is just the last chapter of the story.
Yep. So tying the bows and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and it's worth doing. Even if you're going to do LFR to clear everything, do the story mode, and just experience it. Is my advice. It was wonderful.
All right. I don't really know what this means, so I'm gonna basically ask. I think Joe is usually the one to talk to. What does Mythic Plus experience in season 2 mean?
I wanted to take a couple moments today. Actually, I'd asked Liz for just a few moments to kind of gush about
of course.
this season of Mythic Dungeons. So season 2, a lot of people were very on the fence with the ones being added to the rotation, how it was going to work, putting Darkcleft in there, the new one with Operation Floodgate, all of this stuff, and how it was going to shake out, if it was going to be harder, easier, especially with all the new changes. I'm here to say that I really am in love with the dungeon choices, and I don't have any complaints for once. There's not one that I just dread going to. Last season, nobody wanted to go to the why can't I think of the name of it now? The
Priory?
No, not the Priory. Stone Vault. Nobody wanted to go to Stone Vault.
Yeah.
Stone Vault was so awful, right? It was just one of those things that was absolutely god awful. And then this one, the only thing that was really a standout was the meadery, because the first boss, the intermission, was just a ton of damage. It was very, very difficult to get through as a healing check, which they immediately tuned within a day of it releasing. Because they're oh, well, yeah, nope, we got to turn this down. But every dungeon just feels good. It feels doable. The routing on them, which is one of the most common complaints with a lot of dungeons, is knowing exactly which mobs to get for your percentages when you're doing keys. It feels you don't have that problem here, at least not really, because in Dark Flame Cleft, which is one of the ones that people were really curious about, it's very linear. It takes you through the dungeon, and you don't necessarily have to pull everything, because by the time you get to the last room, there's usually enough leftover mobs for you to kind of go ahead and make up that count. You don't have to go out of your way to pull extra mobs in a lot of the dungeons. You just go along your normal path. And so it becomes more about execution and less about where do I find 1.3%. And that feels really, really good. I can't tell you last season how many times in my experience, we were doing keys, especially higher level keys, and we're desperately trying to push our way through and make count, and also make the time, and then only to get to the end and realize that we need to still find a pack, especially in the spider dungeons, which filled me with nothing but dread. I hated healing those. I'm not gonna lie. These, I am thoroughly impressed with the way that they learned their lessons from season 1. I am very happy with the choices. I'm hearing this a lot from a lot of other folks, and the fact that people are now dipping their toes in that maybe skipped last season of Mythic Plus Dungeons are jumping in because they're hearing it's not as nightmarish as the last one. Because again, the last one was and Stops in chat and he can keep me honest, there were 3 or 4 dungeons that people just it was hell to do. And one thing goes sideways and the entire run is scuffed. There's just nothing you could. So I just wanted to put that out there that I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the lessons they learned, how they put everything together. It's just, I'm really, really impressed with this season. That might change when I start pushing 10s. I'll let you know. I might hate life at that point. But yeah, and even the Zalteth fixes, they feel better. They feel more manageable. I think they may have fixed the algorithm for how the balls spawn when you need to get rid of them too, because there's not one just out in the middle of Delaware.
I realized you weren't referencing Baldur's Gate, but it's still, you made me think it for a second.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing to point out is we're talking about delves as well. And apparently in season 2, they've already decided to nerf tank Brann. So I guess he's doing too well as a tank. I haven't done a delve with Brann as yet. Go ahead.
I'm curious, Joe, if you've run with Brann as a tank in delves.
I have, actually. I switched him over immediately because he stinks as a healer.
Yeah.
I loved him as a tank. I think it was a really smart choice. I thought it made, for me as somebody who primarily plays a healing class, and when I switched to DPS to do a delve, pulling aggro is generally hard because I will pull aggro. My trinkets, generally, if they proc, I'm going to pull stuff. I'm going to pull stuff away from Brann and his little guys. And that usually means that I'm going to die at higher level delves. I didn't have that problem. Now, he died at higher level delves, and I had to resurrect him. But that's fine. I can deal with that. That's okay. But yeah, like, I really like it. And I hear that there's some nerfs coming because he was felt to be too strong. And maybe I could see that, but selfishly, please don't change Brann. Listen, he was an idiot last year that just did like really goofy, weird stuff, ran off careening into the abyss to find some treasure halfway across the map while I'm in the middle of combat, and he's actually doing what I need him to do right now. Please don't change it. I'm afraid you're going to break him.
So there is a whole like page of changes coming to him. A lot of damage reductions, but also he takes 60% more damage, and his maximum health has been reduced by 20%, which that on its own is a lot, but it's also like his pistol shot down by 15%. His electrocharged pistol damage reduced by 35%. It's just a whole list of things like this. And his brown bear melee auto attack reduced by 80%. Brown bear stomp damage reduced by 25%. It just keeps going.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that makes sense for... Sorry, I guess that makes sense for like damage reduction if he's in tank mode, because he doesn't really need damage to hold threat if they're doing other things for him to hold threat.
Yeah, so. But they seem to be hitting his damage really hard, but also his survivability pretty hard. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
I don't know, and I just want him not to be bad.
I mean, that'd be nice. I have better. I've been running as DPS lately, and I have better luck with him as a healer than as another DPS, because he may not be a great healer, but he's still a healer, and that's something.
Listen, throwing potions on the ground and telling you to walk over them does not constitute as healing. And I say this as somebody who's played healing. I'm looking at you, Brann. Get your head out of your butt, man. Throw them on somebody, not next to them. Come on.
Wasn't that essentially the whole priest Lightwell thing? I mean, come on, they've done it before.
I don't want to play fetch with my healer.
Okay, we've never tried just throwing potions at people in a raid. Maybe this is the answer to raid healing. I don't know.
You have to understand, as a person who plays a Resto Shaman, and you've heard me, how many times in a raid do I yell at people to stand on the healing circle? And Est, if you're listening to this, I'm looking directly at you. I having the healing thing just out of reach or put right next to me feels like an insult to me who puts it on people. It feels like an affront.
I'm so happy right now because I don't have any dog in this fight, because whenever I have Brann, I don't care if he tanks because I'm gonna tank, and you guys are like, I don't know, I'm like blissfully unconcerned. It feels so good. It feels so good to not care about something in World of Warcraft. Because here's the thing about them nerfing him. I'm looking at these nerfs. There's like 30 of them. There's a lot of nerfs.
It's a good list.
And the one that really comes to me is, I'm imagining if you were playing a tank and you saw on a list of changes to your class, receive 60% increased damage. Like I know tanking people. I have spoken to many a tank. The reaction would either be a sputtering tornado of building rage, or a complete "I gotta go, excuse me," and water droplets that aren't quite water. in their track as they head to change themselves, because I can't imagine he's that good at tank.
He's
Like,
not.
Is he that
He's
good
not.
that he needs a 60% damage increase?
He's incredibly like sturdy, which good. That's what your tank should be. But it's not like he's not blasting his way through absolutely every encounter ever. Like as Joe can attest to, you have to heal him. He gets in this weird stunned recovering state when he's taken too much damage, and then if you are, say, not a tank, you are going to get your face melted. So, and you have an opportunity to then like kind of break him out of it. But they said they were going to improve the experience with Brann, and now they're like, JK, we overshot the mark. You're having too much fun too early, and I'm disappointed. I am disappointed, but I think I could give Matt something to care about in WoW again, and that's a customizable Chihuahua pet.
I'm listening.
It's in the 11.1.5 PTR, along with a baked in to the game cooldown manager / weak aura replacement. But really, the customizable Chihuahua is where it's at, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I don't. Whenever they do that, when they built in something that previously existed as a mod, I think it's cool, but I'm much more interested in the customizable Chihuahua. I want to know if they have a Chihuahua that's the size of my Chihuahua, because my Chihuahua is 16 pounds and not fat. She's just big for a Chihuahua. People don't know this. The 5-pound Chihuahuas you see people carrying around in their purse are purebreds that are bred very specifically to a breed standard. Most Chihuahuas are not that small. Like, my dog is comparable in size to like a Pomeranian. And I would love to see a Chihuahua that looks like my dog, because my dog is really awesome, because she's my dog, and I'm going to say that. But regardless, I'm very much interested in these customizable Chihuahua pet.
I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm happy for you, but I'm really interested in that cooldown manager.
I'm very interested in the cooldown manager as well, because especially if you watched, and I'm referencing external content here, but Taliesin and Evitel did an episode where he played WoW on one of each type of class, if I remember correctly, without any add-ons whatsoever. And this was one of the things that he mentioned, was that he had to kind of kludge something together. And Liz, I think you and I have even talked about that, where you can kind of, with like an additional action bar, give yourself like a monitoring pane, but like you don't really have one.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm doing right now, because I haven't gone through and set up a whole bunch of weak auras. I have an extra action bar, and things pop up with the highlight when you have, your cooldown is up, or this procced, and so now this is highlighted to tell you something procced related to it. So right now, I literally have no sophisticated cooldown tracking. I have a button bar, which it works. It works. It's just not. It's less customizable. Well, one of the things.
Well,
Go on, Joe.
I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about that customization. I don't know if you actually read the thread or like went through on it at all. But like it's effectively broken down into a couple different categories, like essential cooldowns, utility cooldowns, tracked bars, and tracked buffs. So like for essential cooldowns, it'll track like rotational impacting things. So like if you're a paladin, crusader, strike, judgment, avenging, wrath, stuff like that. And it's all done per class, right? And it's for your individual character. Utility cooldowns are interrupts or mobility or crowd control stuff. They're going to have their own little section for it that can be tracked. Tracked bars, things that have durations are going to be there. So things that change your rotation, like they call out combustion as an effect, or in my case, if you're a resto shaman, undulation or tidal waves or any of the other chain heal buffs that you can get from talents will be in there as well. And then there are tracked buffs, which again, we have buffs and debuff tracking already, but sometimes you care about very specific ones. And apparently stuff like this for like Maelstrom weapon or in durations of certain effects are going to be there as well. I think this is a fantastic first start. What I really want to see this grow into is a replacement for Aura 3. And
Yes.
the reason I say that is because as a former raid leader and as somebody who often gets in, and Liz will tell you about this, I occasionally get into a hyper focus mode when we're like on a boss that's like really challenging. And I'm sorry, Rosa, if you're listening, sometimes I take over quarterbacking stuff for healers. I want to be able to track their cooldowns, and I have Aura set up to track down or to track all of the major cooldowns for all of the healing classes right now. I'd love to have something built into the game that just does that when you're in a raid group, that I can customize, that I can like do what I do with Aura 3 and just eliminate one additional add-on, just have it built into the game. I don't know if that's where they're going to go with it. I hope that we see something like that. But between this and their version of weak auras, which they kind of already have in the game, because, you know, when certain things light up, you already get those icons. Because I'm going to be 100% real with you. I hate weak auras. It's very, very useful. And I do have a little bit of a programming background, and I still hate weak auras because I can never get it to do exactly the thing I want it to do. And I always feel like I'm searching some weird GitHub repository, like trying to find the one string of code I need to do the one niche thing I need. And if they put something in game that lets me do that, I would be so much happier. And maybe this cooldown will do it too, because this is just a personal complaint. Sorry, random aside, it's my turn. Tracking Earth Shield charges is a pain, and getting it to show very specifically like when it's off or on is easy. Getting to show when it has how many X charges left so that you know when to cast it again, instead of just saying, oh, it's off, or saying, oh, it's at 1. I'm going to cast it now because by the time my cast is done or the inflate is done, it'll refresh to 9 and the last charge will have already been expended because min-maxing is a thing. That's super niche and super hard to do. But if they can give me something in game that just shows me the number of charges on a cooldown bar or in an aura that I can just click a button and it's just built in, I'm there. Like, this is the type of stuff I love. I live for. Like, these are great changes to like the base game. Sorry, that was a whole lot.
No, the thing I also find cool is that I feel like it means they're not, you know, one of the things they said when they implemented the UI edit mode was that they didn't want to treat the UI like a static fixed thing anymore. And I think that this is another way that they're embracing that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they have 4 different coat colors for Chihuahuas. Sorry, guys.
No, that's
while
the
you were having that
priority.
incredibly intelligent discussion of all the pros and cons of this new stuff, I was going, oh, wow, they got 4 different coat colors, and they got a shark hat, and they got a kitty hat, and they got a fox hat, and they got a murloc hat, and they have a different shark hat, and another cat hat, and another murloc hat.
That murloc hat is peak cuteness.
I should note this is data mined from the patch 11.1.5 files, so we don't know if this is everything. We don't know how you're going to customize it. We don't know how you're going to get it, but it is in the patch. So
I'm looking at pictures of it, and that's all I can do is go. I actually had to call my wife into the office to show her this while you guys were talking. I'm like, they're going to go for a bit. They'll go for a bit. I can trust Joe to talk about this. And so I just was like, yeah, texting her. She comes in, and I'm like pointing and scrolling and pointing and scrolling. So yeah, and then of course there's other stuff that there's been data mined as well, and we don't want to spend it's like when we talked about the BAFTAs that time, and we don't want to talk about everything. But I will say this: be on the lookout for extremely cute cats. I'm gonna just say that there are cats; they are cute. So
and
yeah,
there's other stuff. There's the
Yep.
story stuff coming in 11.1.5. There's a return to horrific visions, which I'm not sure how I feel about. Luckily, it's optional.
The thing that's there. I will say one of the things I'm really interested in is Dastardly Duos, which is it's a new 6-week-long event where you can go up and fight animatronic versions of past bosses. So I'm very curious as what these animatronic versions look like and what exactly the rewards will be. You can fight with a party and fight 2 or more bosses at a time. 2, Blizzard says, rack up your highest score and earn a variety of cosmetics, toys, and even some dungeon items. I am very curious as to how this one will work out.
Well,
So
testing
we're
for
going to
that one-
see.
Testing for that one's only a week too.
Yeah.
And it begins next Monday, so maybe folks can report back and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool." Joe, I'm looking at you. If you feel like engaging with the PTR, that is.
I mean, it's likely going to be a thing. I don't engage with the PTR often because I don't have time. This is probably something I will. It like legitimately, it takes a lot to get me to install the PTR and go to town. Usually, it's some catastrophic shaman change, and I need to check my math. But this stuff, yeah, no, probably.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually just installed another PTR, which is next up on our
Oh.
subject list.
A 10 gigabyte PTR, by my understanding.
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
we'll just
was
jump over to
beefy.
that then. Diablo 4. We found out during the campfire chat, which was last week, right? Like I'm not having a neural
was
meltdown.
Friday.
Yeah,
It was
it
last
just
week. It was
happened.
Friday. Okay, I'm just sitting there going, that was last week, right? Please tell me it was last week.
Yeah.
So yeah, PTR is going to be running this week, as in tomorrow, because today's the 10th.
Today,
Or the 11th?
it's live.
Okay, so it's the 11th today. All right, yeah, that's fine. I'm not like sitting here going, I can never remember what day it is anymore. But yeah, so from this week till until next Tuesday, the 18th.
Yep. Tuesday to Tuesday.
So they're making Torment harder because Torment 4 should be aspirational. We have
That's
quotes here.
correct.
So
That was, in fact, what they said. They said Torment 4 should be a difficult thing that should be aspirational. And in Season 7, which is going on now, they felt that players hit Torment 4 way too fast and that players simply leveled and progressed too quickly, which I can say progression is very fast in Season 7. It's a lot of fun because you can zoom through the levels, you collect all sorts of cool gear, but also I haven't unlocked Torment 4 myself, so I feel this messaging is not targeted towards me, who has been playing on Torment 3.
well, I don't know who made this note, but I think it's a good note to make, in that the latest season journey required objectives in Torment 4. So
Yeah,
are you basically
the
trying to
top-
say that it's aspirational, but at the same time, if you want to get your season journey done, you have to do it? So which is it?
One of the things that happened in Season 7 was they made the season journey much more difficult because they felt the higher levels of the season journey were too easy. So they made the top tier of the season journey is a whole lot of stuff you have to do in Torment 4. I think there's one thing on that top level that doesn't have to be done in Torment 4, and everything else is just do a whole lot of stuff and do it in Torment 4.
Right.
So the question is, when they make Torment 4 and all of the torments more difficult, which they're doing next season, are they also going to keep this philosophy where the season journey requires you to do things at that difficulty to get all the rewards? Because this season, to get the Raven Pet, you have to complete the full season journey, and the Raven Pet is really cool. So the season journey isn't easy to complete, but Blizzard seems to think it's too easy. So is this going to be the new thing, that Torment 4 is an aspirational level that normal average players should not be able to achieve, or will have a lot of trouble achieving? And does that mean that these high-level cosmetic rewards will be locked forever? I mean, this, depending on what the details look like here, I may be much, much less interested in Season 8. Because, hey, we don't like people moving fast and killing things fast and progressing through the difficulties. We don't like that. It's like, have you ever played an ARPG, guys? Have you? Because that's why I'm playing this game, to smash lots of demons really fast. And, you know, that's kind of why I'm here.
And
So-
I never thought I would say this, but when they had certain things unlock at certain difficulties, and this is actually a huge lead-in, now that I think of it, to our next topic, which is the Season 8 theme, it made more sense. Like, when we had the 4 difficulty tiers, and I can't believe I already managed to block out what the 3rd tier was called, you were only in it from about level 50 to level 70, and it kind of felt like a slog. But on the upside, you had bosses on the boss ladder that unlocked at that 3rd difficulty, And so you had something that was kind of unique where you weren't going to be doing it in the first two. And you could blaster it in the highest difficulty, but like it felt like the difficulty progression, right? And I feel like they've lost that with the new difficulty, the 4 and 4. Where you go, leveling up to end game progression. And there's nothing to make each of those torments feel unique anymore. Feel like, you should be spending time in 1, 2, or 3 on your way to 4 instead of just sprinting to Torment 4. And if they want to distinguish from, because they've already said they don't want to go into the Diablo 3 difficulty system where you really only spend a little bit of time, in Torments 1 or 2, or Torment 6, or Torment 10, which Torments 10 to 13 were like kind of the target range for completing that season journey. If you're not going to shape up to that model, then give us a reason to be in those lower torments and don't gatekeep Torment 4 just because you think like people are reaching it too fast.
This is also a problem I feel that could be solved by adding more difficulty levels. If the top difficulty level is not hard enough, if you think people are getting there too easily, add another difficulty level that makes the game harder. But the Diablo 4 team seems to think that the Diablo 3 way is not the way to go. They kind of seem to laugh at the number of difficulty levels in Diablo 3, which indeed there are a ton of difficulty levels in Diablo 3. What did it go up to? Torment 13? 15? 16. So
I'll be
that's a lot of levels.
I did not have a problem with them having 16 torment levels.
I
never saw it as a concern. Never saw it as.
I think part of that was because it was balanced. You had, the 4. What was it? Normal, expert, or normal, hard, expert, master, and then you could go up to Torment 6 while you were leveling. You wouldn't often do that, although nowadays you can do that and blast to level 70 within a couple hours. But there was an even split, and they've got an even split now, but they don't really give you a reason to, stay in the lower tiers. So why wouldn't people push forward to Torment 4 as fast as possible?
I definitely think that there's an idea in Diablo 4 that the thing keeping you at Torment 3 should nearly be that you cannot survive Torment 4 yet. Like that seems to be the thing that they think should be the limiter on why you're in a Torment level. Like you're in this level because you can't go up yet. And I used to stay in lower Torment levels when I was playing Diablo 3, not because I couldn't handle higher Torment levels. I had characters I was running Torment 16 with. Sometimes I deliberately run Torment 12 just so I'd have an easier time doing specific things that were just milk runs. Like nobody was doing bounties to get materials who wanted that to be at Torment 16. Mm-hmm. Like, why do I, it's not like I'm going to get that much more stuff out of this for the amount of time I'm going to have to spend. I think
and now with enmities, you don't even have to do that. You can get all your mats from your challenge rifts and enmities.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't, I ultimately feel like Diablo 4 has made great strides since it came out, but there is sort of a mentality of trying to, it almost feels like Diablo 4 sometimes gets a little bit too caught up in trying to like almost wear shades and be cool all the time.
It feels like Diablo 4 invests a lot of time in trying to not be Diablo 3. And I almost wonder if this is we're going to see this for Season 8, and then in Season 9, it's going to be totally different. Because there have been times in the past when the Diablo 4 team has taken a stance against doing things like Diablo 3, and then they change their mind in the next major patch cycle. Because they realize, hey, Diablo 3 did some things right. Actually, we should do that. So,
like goblins.
So I wouldn't be surprised if in another major patch cycle or 2 after this one, if we don't just see some more difficulty levels, which would be the easiest way to tune difficulty higher.
But like,
I have nothing more to say, but I felt like I had to say something.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Liz.
I was gonna say, for all the, and I have many thoughts that Liz has had to hear, and one of our other writers, Chris, has had to hear. As annoying as this perspective may feel to us, like there's definitely some good stuff coming in this patch. So I guess I could just lead into it, which is they're reworking the boss ladder is still going to exist.
Quite frankly, I was going to ask you what happens, what letter is after the M there, because it just stops, and I'm like, to make them easier and make them tasty. What? No, what's happening? So please go.
Bosses. So they're going to be easier to get to, and your approach with the summoning materials is going to be completely different. So there's going to be a switch to how you use the summoning materials, and that means you'll be able to fight the bosses without having to leverage those summoning materials. Instead, they're going to act like keys to unlock their loot. And that's incredible, because it felt awful, and I have actually lost count of the number of the times this happened to me with Duriel. It felt awful to summon the boss and try again and tune your gear and have to go back and repair your gear after a number of initial failures, and come back and try again. And for whatever reason, even if it's as simple as a disconnect, or you can't do the fight at that time, you have thrown away those materials that you had to put some effort into farming. And that felt really bad. And so that's going to be a different experience now, and I'm really looking forward to that. There's also going to be additions to the boss ladder that are going to be central of the theme or the quote-unquote storyline of season 8. But they're permanent additions. They're not going anywhere. I guess since they said it in the campfire chat, I don't have to worry about spoiling it.
They said this is literally happening. It's been announced.
So joining the boss ladder lineup is none other than Belial, which means we now have 4 of the 7 major evils of the Burning Hells returned to Sanctuary, which also, of course, brings up the question in my head of, so when is the titular character of the series going to show up? But that's a whole nother can of worms to open up.
I just find myself wondering if that means that we're getting Belial in season 8. Because
Yes.
Belial's not in the game right now.
Yes.
I mean, like,
Yes,
are we going
that is what
we
it
are
means.
literally getting Belial in season 8. That is season 8.
That's the season theme.
So he
Yes.
is part of the season theme.
Okay, that's what I was thinking about.
But so he is part of this. I'll say he's part of the season story, and he is involved in the season theme. But the season theme itself, in terms of the quote unquote bar power system that we'll get as part of the theme, is actually about stealing the powers of these endgame bosses. So anyone from, like Varshan, Lord Zir, to Andariel and Duriel, to even the Wandering Death and Belial, and even Lilith. They actually, referenced a Lilith power, which I should say Echo of Lilith or Uber Lilith. Those will all be, potentially up for grabs, and each power is going to have, like a power option and then a modifier option, which reminds me of another system, and I could not for the life of me think of it. So if any of you know maybe what I'm talking about there, then please throw it in. But you're going to have an unlock. You'll have, like, I think it was something like 24 different build combos or something like that. Because between one, active power and one modifier power. And that's really cool, right? Like that's unique. Like you could go around, shooting Lilith's spike circles, and then have that be modified by the Wandering Depths beam, like the laser beam that shoots out. And that I'm really intrigued by this system. I have downloaded the PTR. I went straight from work into podcasts today, so I haven't tried it yet since it just opened up. But I will be trying it and I will report back.
I do love the idea of getting the Wandering Death's ability and I'm just gonna spin around and be a laser beam for a while. It's gonna be great. Right? Everything's gonna be dead. I think this is a really fun season theme. It's super thematic. It draws from all of the cool things that are already in the game with all of these bosses. And to gain these different powers in Season 8, you will kill the bosses and then you will be able to access their power. So Belial is joining the boss ladder. The whole season is kind of themed around Belial, but he is also permanently joining the boss ladder. And we're also getting 2 others on the boss ladder, which is the Harbinger of Hatred. Do I have that one right?
Yep. Who we just fought in Vessel of Hatred.
Yes. And Uravar, who we also still fought in Vessel of Hatred and kind of showed up and left so fast that you forget who he was until they bring him back up. He will now be in the boss ladder as well. So I think all of the changes are really good changes. I'm a little iffy on the Torment thing, but I think the boss ladder changes are fantastic. Going to make it a lot easier. There are plenty of times where to even find something on the boss ladder, I had to go look up a guide because I'm like, okay, where is this one? I'm looking through the map. I'm looking on the map. Okay, here's something that's a boss icon on the map, but I don't remember who's in this spot. Okay, I need to Google it.
Yep, and that's going to be permanently improved.
Yeah, so the icons are going to stand out more, and also they will tell you things like, hey, this boss is in here. And it's going to tell you the summoning materials too, isn't it? On the icon?
That's correct. We should see. Now we're going to have to change how we refer to them because they're no longer summoning materials; they're reward materials.
Yeah, and also you'll be able to teleport to them, so it's just going to be way easier to access these things. You will just be able to go in and fight them because I have wasted a lot of time running down to a boss area and then going in, and it's like, oh crap! I have 4 of these things, and I need 5. Now I've got to go off and find another thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or, okay, I've gotten 5 of these things. I summoned this boss and, oh wow, this is a lot harder than I thought and I can't kill it. And then you've just thrown those materials away. So both of those hurdles gone. And I think that's a great improvement.
Yes, I think we all agree. And if we don't, whatever, I agree with it. That's all that matters to me. We basically are going to move on to our other games section. Liz, do you want to do your site news before or after the other games thing? Because I think we're going to be pretty done pretty soon.
Sure, I'll do my site news.
Okay.
I do want to remind you all that Blizzard Watch is made possible by Patreon. It is your support that allows the site to continue to thrive and to grow. I hope. That's the goal here, is thriving and growing. So I did want to thank a couple of new supporters in the past week. We have Warren Warpath. I love this name because it's Warren with 2 R's and Warpath also with 2 R's.
This makes me think of a magic card. I immediately love this name.
Yes, it's great. Upgraded their pledge to $25 a month. Thank you so much. It is supporters like you that really, really help the site continue, make these podcasts possible. Supporters get all kinds of cool benefits, but probably the ones y'all are most interested in are at $3. You get early access to these podcasts, and you get them ad-free. Both are great if you love podcasts. If you like listening to us, $3 a month will get you that. Kelly, I hope I'm saying that right, also pledged for $5. Thank you, Kelly. $5 also gets you an ad-free site experience, so you can go to blizzardwatch.com and enjoy all of our articles without advertisements. That includes a lot of coverage of the Race to World First this week. We're talking about patch 11.15, and I tried to hit all the latest news. We're going to have some more on the Diablo PTR now that it is up. So if you're curious about any of those things, hit the site, blizzardwatch.com, and I think that's all I have. Thank you guys so much. If you can support us, subscribe on patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Any amount you can give us helps.
And I do want to just add a couple quick things here at the end there. We also look at our Patreon subscribers first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on when you send us questions. And I wanted to call this out specifically at this point because Kaylee has actually sent in, wow, words are hard, folks, has sent in many questions in the past, and we really do appreciate it. And as a reminder, if you're a Patreon subscriber, we have a Discord channel set aside for that where you can hit us up. So it allows you, if you support us on Patreon, to get to that private channel, which is the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel. And then if you are not a Patreon subscriber, we do appreciate the continued support as well. Sharing our content, listening to our content, liking our content, commenting on our content does actually help a lot. And if you wanted to submit questions and you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can always hit us up on our Discord server at the Q and Podcast Questions channel, or send us an email at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. All we ask is that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line. And if you have any special pronunciation of your name, you put it in the body of whatever message you sent us to, because it makes our life a lot easier.
I actually have a question that got sent in by a Patreon supporter for Lore Watch that I need to send it to you, Joe. So
it works.
I'll do that after the show.
It works. There's the proof.
Yes, I have a question. You will have it in your mailbox.
Okay. Trying to get to this quickly because I think at this point we're really up against time. But
let's go. We got time for a question.
Yes, the BAFTAs have currently open survey asking people to nominate the most influential video game of all time. And the form is open till March 13th, according to this. No, March 20th. So you've got till about next week. Rather than just go on to a discussion of that, I just want to ask each of you, if you were going to do this, if you were going to be nominating a game to be the most influential game of all time, man, that's subjective. Which game would you nominate? And we'll go first to Joe.
That is a loaded question because there are so many very good options. Man, that hurts. I'm going to actually give it to Mario 64. All right. And it's going to sound like a weird one, but here's why. Mario 64 did something that no other game before it had really done on consoles, and even on PC, which was it literally taught developers how specifically to work in 3D space with a controllable camera. So if you think about it, games that came beforehand, even if they were, and I'm going to air quote here, 3D, weren't necessarily really fully 3D. They were doing things that were tricking or allowing it, like the Doom games. The Doom games presented as a pseudo 3D as you're moving through the map, but they were doing tricks with 2D rendering to get that happening. You couldn't aim up and down. You just had to move your mouse left and right. The same thing with like Duke Nukem 3D, things like that. Mario 64 changed that game. I just watched a documentary on this like maybe 2 months ago, and I think it's really up there as something that should be appreciated for what it did in making what we now take for granted as just basic games like Horizon Zero Dawn or Monster Hunter or all these other 3D action games that we have with wonderful cameras that you can move around and all these cinematic experiences would not exist without this.
Okay, Liz Harper.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that this is such an open-ended question. What is the most influential game? Where do you even start with that? I mean, you could go back and say something like Zork, because this started, just this very basic way of telling stories. I remember when I was pretty young playing Hack. Did any of you know what I'm talking about with Hack or NetHack?
Yep, I sure do.
You're a little ASCII @ on your screen navigating a dungeon made completely of ASCII characters. And it's randomly generated. The monsters you encounter are random. The loot you get is random. Sounds a lot like Diablo, doesn't it? Only Diablo has slightly better graphics. So, I mean, you could go back to these touchstones because games like that have led to everything that comes after them. So do you go back and you talk about those first games, which are the games that started gaming down this path that's gone so long? I think I'm going to talk about the game. This is a gimme. I'm going to talk about the game that has been most impactful on my life, and I think has been a big touchstone in gaming. It's such a gimme. I'm going to say World of Warcraft because it really shaped multiplayer gaming. There was multiplayer gaming before, there were MMOs before, there's multiplayer gaming after, MMOs after, but Warcraft, I feel, catalyzed the community of gaming in a unique way and has held on to that after so many years. So
can I piggyback on that real quick too? I was going to say WoW was up there too, for all the things you mentioned, but also WoW made gaming mainstream.
That's true.
Yes.
And I don't think that can possibly be understated. Gaming had already always existed, but WoW pushed it into popular culture and made it ever present and made it cool to be a gamer, which we talk about that lightning in a bottle, which other games, yes, they existed. And yes, people played them, but it wasn't cool to be a gamer. WoW did that.
And WoW is a game that's been with us for 20 years now. I have lifelong friendships I've made with WoW. I met everyone in this podcast because of WoW. And it has had, I think, WoW, for people who have played it for a long time, can have such an impact on your life because it becomes a social forum. It's not just a game. It's where you make friends. It's where you go to talk to people and socialize and hang out. It is kind of a unique phenomenon that brings people together. And I know it's not the only multiplayer game out there, but WoW feels like it catalyzed a gaming community in a unique way. And it's somehow kept doing that for 2 decades now. I think, so there you go. WoW.
Okay. Liz P.
So WoW was a big one. I actually have, the kind of gimme answer as well, which I was going to say Pong, because I think that's one of the games that is literally.
You and I are very close-minded because that was my first pick as well, but then I changed my mind.
It's so just into the common collective memory now, But my other answer was Super Mario Land, because it was the first Game Boy story or first Game Boy game. So it would have been the first handheld game. And that's spectacular, because that I argue that also pushed gaming forward a great deal. Hey, that leads the way to things like Pokemon.
Is it though the first game? Wasn't that like the Game and Watch stuff though? I'm not.
Tennis for Two is usually credited.
Tennis for Two is the first video game. Pong is not the first.
I'm just talking about. I'm talking about mobile handhelds.
Oh, so I mentioned Super Mario Land because that was the first game that released for the Game Boy. They also had a few baked in kind of basic games, and then when it released in the US, it also came with Tetris as an option. But the Game Boy is probably the I will say
it's the most influential
arguably
handheld,
because I think it's the most influential handheld. And I think that also changed gaming because that led to our experience nowadays with literally gaming on our phones.
Yeah, you're right about that. I hadn't thought about. But are you done? Because I don't want to jump on your thing. If you
no, I'm done.
All right, mine's a little different because mine is sort of the opposite. Like, your guys are all very positive. I'm thinking about a game that basically helped crystallize the dangers of rushed crunch time development in gaming. Like, the first game that really, as a result of those things, had a bad outcome. It's the first game that actually made people stop and think, is this an industry that can survive? And that game, and the thing that came after it, is 1982's E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the Atari 2600, because it nearly killed video gaming. And it's not that it didn't do it by being that important. It wasn't the actual cause. It's the focal point. It's the thing everyone points to as they rushed this game out. They basically pushed it all on one person to develop it entirely by himself, which is true for a lot of games of that era. And they didn't that they didn't tell you who made a game.
Yeah, people's names were not associated with it. It was
the whole reason for the first Easter eggs in video games were to sneak in their names.
Yep.
And that's one of the many reasons why the industry was bleeding people who knew how to design games. People would come in, make a game, and never want to do it again. So when E.T. came out, they had basically projected, and if you've ever heard of EA making a prediction on sales, you'll say, oh, deja vu. They had predicted something like 20 million units sold. And it's like, in what fantasy land were you going to sell 20 million units of an Atari 2600 cartridge? But because E.T. was a big movie, people thought it was going to sell gangbusters. And it sold okay, but not gangbuster. And so they ended up burying like tens of thousands of copies of this game in the desert. And, companies fell apart. Atari went from being like this, the company by which the fortunes of its creators were made, to the thing that allowed Chuck E. Cheese to exist in like 1 year. And today we see all the legacies of E.T. the Extraterrestrial in bad practices now, like crunch time rushing people, coming up with ways to cut their names out. Like, oh, you left halfway through, so you don't get to be on the credits, even if you designed half of the game. In a real way, E.T. is like the grinning harbinger of terrible times to come. And so I think it's extremely influential in video games today. So that's why I'm going with E.T. the Extraterrestrial. But I almost went with Pong.
Then I'm glad I said it.
But I think that's it, unless anybody else has anything. I'm surprised nobody else had anything to say about E.T. Like, it wasn't that bad, but I guess none of you played it.
I did. I played the heck out of that game, but I'm not about to sit here and argue that it's a good game. I just wouldn't make that
argument.
It was a good game for an Atari 2600 game. None of them were great.
No, it wasn't.
All right. It was Boris and
I played Adventure.
Which was itself bad. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And Adventure was an opus compared to E.T.
Yeah, I mean the original Pitfall. Anyway, the fact that E.T. even existed, man. But this has been the Blizzard Watch podcast. I want to thank Liz Pat for being here with us. Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome.
I also want to thank Joe and Liz H for being here, because without them I'd have to do a lot more, and I don't think I'd be able to handle it, quite frankly. So thank you, both of you, so much for all the work you do for this podcast each and every week.
No problem.
That's what we're here for.
And finally, thank you to all of you who are listening, supporting us, whether it's by being on Patreon. I will point you again to Liz's thing about Patreon earlier, or simply by telling people about the site and the podcast, or listening to one of our many podcasts. Liz, what's the current state of Tavern Watch in terms of the next game releasing?
Tavern Watch, I was going to mention that and I forgot. Thank you for the reminder, Matt. Tavern Watch is our podcast about tabletop gaming, and we just started a new game release called Triangle Agency. That's 3 episodes. The first episode is already out. And next month we have a game called Pigeons 11 coming out. I think both of these games were very fun. Others in this podcast could tell you if Pigeons 11 was fun, but that should be, I think that'll probably be 3 episodes when we get it together. So we have an ongoing weekly tabletop games for you to listen to. We have talk shows we're doing once a month about the latest tabletop news. If you enjoy that kind of stuff, which we try not to talk about here because we're talking about it in another podcast, please search for Tavern Watch in your podcast player or service of choice, or watch blizzardwatch.com. They are posted there every Monday. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Liz. So yeah, again, guys, thank you for being here and supporting us. This has been the Blizzard Watch podcast. We'll be back next week.